I would like to start this video by clarifying a number of things. I strongly believe that when a game launches, it should launch in a finished state, with minimal bugs, stable frame rate across all platforms, and it should ship with all intended content at launch. The reason I say all of this is because you're currently watching a video about Cyberpunk 2077, and everybody knows about this game's launch by now. I don't want to spend too much time talking about this game's broken launch throughout the video because, simply put, we've all seen and heard about it a million times. I'm not going to show you any glitch compilations to further prove this. If you're really interested, I'm sure there are dozens of videos exactly like that you can watch. But once again, I don't agree that games should be shipped in an unfinished state. When a game releases unfinished, that is a problem, and it is a trend that needs to die in gaming because, quite frankly, I'm getting sick at looking at JPEGs posted to Twitter from game development studios apologizing for how shit their game is. That being said, I also firmly believe that Cyberpunk 2077 has always been a good or even a great game. Throughout the years, CDPR have improved a number of the technical issues this game shipped with, and because of that, we've seen many statements from people, some along the lines of, Cyberpunk is good now, or it's not the game it was at launch. I want to make it very clear that Cyberpunk 2077 today has a good amount of technical improvements over its launch. But that isn't what this video is about. I'm not going to be talking about the technical improvements made by CDPR, and instead, I'm going to be talking about the game itself, everything underlying the technical stuff, and why I believe that Cyberpunk 2077 has always been great. Now, let's quickly go over why I think this. While many people might instantly write off that statement because of the technical issues that I mentioned, I don't, because everything that I love about this game has always been here since launch. Spectacular quest design, rivaling even The Witcher 3 at times, the stunning world, fun combat, interesting characters, a well-paced story, and a banging soundtrack. All of this has been in the game since launch, and every update released since launch hasn't improved upon any of these aspects of the game. Now, that isn't a dig, by the way. I don't expect the game developers to make drastic changes to its gameplay, story, or world post-launch. That's ridiculous, and I can't recall any game that actually has done that. But what I am saying is that the updates that everyone claims is what turned this game around hasn't made improvements on the core aspects of what's so great about this game. Sure, it fixed many things from the technical perspective, and I understand that many people weren't able to play this game, therefore not allowing them to experience these great systems in the first place. I agree, this sucks, and this game would have been so much better received if it was launched in a better state. But this video is mainly targeted at the people that say Cyberpunk is a good game now. That's what really motivated me to make this video, because I think this game has been good ever since its launch. Firstly, let's go over what I think is the strongest aspect of Cyberpunk 2077. Night City. Night City is stunning from both a visual and mechanical point of view. If I had to quickly go over problems I have with the world, I have one main issue with it: the lack of a side game or a mini game. If you've watched my Assassin's Creed Valhalla video, you may know how much I love when open world games have a little mini game that you can play, such as Gwent, Orlog, or even real card games like poker or blackjack that you might see in Red Dead or Fallout. Mini games like this add a lot more to the world than many people might originally think. It not only adds a deeper layer of interactivity, but also adds to the world building and helps to breathe life into your world. Gwent isn't just a cheap distraction in The Witcher 3. It's a fully fledged card game with its own unique cards and rules, and it was so well designed that it launched its own unique multiplayer spin-off a few years later. But Gwent wasn't just a card game as well. It was used as a means to expand on the world of The Witcher. There's a side quest in the game where your friend Zoltan will ask you to collect 3 specific cards for him. The reasoning for this is because Gwent cards in the world have increased in value, and Zoltan owes money to a debtor. So he would like these 3 specific cards, which particularly have appreciated in value, so that he could sell them in order to pay off his debts. I won't spoil the entire quest, but it's a very deep, very well-designed, multi-part side quest that shows you how Gwent affects the economic side of this fictional world. Now, the reason I bring up this side quest is to show how a simple minigame like Gwent can not only add as a means for added content in your game, but also as a way to expand on the storytelling of your game and world. Cyberpunk 2077 lacks a card game like Gwent, and I think in a world as deep and rich as Cyberpunk's, it would have done it good to have something like this implemented. Thankfully, every other aspect of Cyberpunk's world is fantastic. From the layout of the city to the visuals. Everything just spot on. Now let's quickly talk about the layout of the city. The layout of the city forces you to navigate it on its terms. If you look at a game like Assassin's Creed Odyssey, for example, you can just push the stick forward and climb any surface or building with no thought behind it. But if you were to look at a game like Breath of the Wild, for example, where you can still climb every surface, you have a stamina bar for climbing, which forces you to think about how you can traverse the world. Cyberpunk achieves the same design philosophy as Breath of the Wild, but under different circumstances. The city is laid out in such a smart way that you cannot simply run in the direction of a map marker and reach it. You must navigate your way through the city and follow each specific path to reach each specific location. This makes the world so much more memorable for it, because if you plan on going to the same location, you'll probably end up taking the same path, and that is by no means a bad thing. By following a similar path to reach your destination, you end up memorizing each pathway, each street, and where it leads, after enough time spent in the world. And this is what makes you connect with each walkway and each crossroad so much more. I feel like this city is constructed from the ground up, with each of its pathways and roads having purpose. Now, let's talk about the quest design. My god, the quest design in this game is spectacular, and at many points reaching the same heights The Witcher 3 reaches, and that is a game notorious for its amazing quest design. If you plan on playing through this game, I strongly encourage you to play through a number of the game's major optional quest lines, as they help you build a connection to the characters featured in those quest lines, and the characters in the main story too, but also can even unlock entirely new endings for the game depending on which quest lines you do. Now, if you look at pretty much any modern open world game, you'll notice a pattern in its quests and how they play out. You might start by going to a spot, and then you'll run into some enemies, and you'll kill those enemies, and then you'll grab some sort of item, and then you'll return to the original location the quest started in. If any of this sounds familiar to you, that's because it is. This is a tired quest formula that really hasn't been changed all that much throughout the history of open world games. However, Cyberpunk 2077 doesn't work like this. You'll begin a quest not knowing how it's going to play out and genuinely feeling surprised more often than not. Sure, there are still your kind of boring filler side quests like gigs, but those are more aimed at, kind of map marker driven open world generic stuff. I'm mainly talking about the more prominent side quests and quest lines in the game, which I can say are just amazing and will surprise you at every turn. I can say with confidence that most of the highlights and best parts of this whole experience came from the side quests. I'd particularly like to highlight the River Ward questline, the Johnny and Samurai questline, Judy and Panam's questlines, as well as Carrie's questline, which spawns off of Johnny and Samurai's questline as well. All of these major questlines are focused on characters that you encounter in the main story, which not only gives it a sense of urgency, despite it being optional, but also becomes easier to connect with because you already know these characters and are eager to learn more about them and build a stronger connection to them. And speaking of these characters, they are just absolutely fantastic, each having distinct personalities and character traits. I gotta say, I loved just about every main character included in the story, except V, the actual main character you play as. V isn't really much of his or her own character, rather a vessel for the player to experience the story through. While this may click for some people, it really didn't click for me all that much, and I personally prefer when a game goes down the path of playing as a preset character or an established character. I personally find it easier to connect with the main character and generally feel more immersed when a game follows this path. However, as mentioned, this is a matter of taste, and if you prefer, say the path that Fallout or Elder Scrolls takes, where you play as a vessel and the game allows you to experience it through a main character that acts as a vessel, then you're gonna love this. But besides V, like I said, pretty much every other character in this game is just simply amazing. Johnny, Judy, Panam, Carrie, River, Takemura, Jackie, and more are all spectacular, and I loved interacting with all these characters as I watched their stories unfold. However, as much as I loved the stories of these individual characters, I never really found the main quest as captivating, mainly because of my lack of a strong connection to V, the center of the story. And also because the side content and character moments that the main plot is going up against are just so strong that it can't really compete and simply falls short in comparison. However, I do think that the main story is paced extremely well. It follows a 3-act structure of sorts, first act lasting about 8 hours roughly. This is mainly your introduction to the game. The second act being the real meat of the story and the plot, lasting you about 10, maybe even 15 hours. And the final act is your conclusion, which is quite short, lasts about less than 4 hours. Now, overall, this main game lasts about 15 to 20 hours, which I personally think is a pretty good length, but a lot of people that have played CDPR games before might expect it to be a bit longer, maybe 30, 40, 50 hours. Bear in mind, this game can absolutely reach those lengths. I just think that this is really where the main quest lines can come into play and help amplify the experience, not only making the main quest last longer, but also helping you connect with these characters even more. This is by no means a bad story, and I did enjoy the main quest, but it is far from the highlight of this game, and neither is the combat. The combat of this game is about as basic as it comes, with a focus on FPS gameplay with some added quick hacking, stealth, and melee options. I should say that while this is an RPG, and all of these other options are available to you, they're never quite as efficient as just blasting through the front door and shooting everything that moves. It's a similar issue I had with AC Valhalla and its stealth. Sure, it's an option, but it doesn't really feel refined as a core part of the experience. It's a significantly worse option when put up against running through the front door and killing everything in open combat, as mentioned. It's the same here, only there's more build flexibility and some quick hacking options to boot. It's not much, but it's something, and while I never much bothered with stealth because I found its inclusion a little contrived, I still appreciate that if you are the type of player that loves stealth, that is an option for you. Sadly, it's just a slightly half-baked one. But once again, this isn't what's gonna make or break Cyberpunk for you. More often than not, if you love Cyberpunk, it'll be because you connected with this world so strongly and the characters in it. Because of the loud, bustling nature of the city, you'll grow to appreciate those smaller, quiet moments so much more, and it is because of those quieter moments that you'll notice yourself loving the world in this game so much more. It is also through the side quests that you'll notice yourself caring and developing a connection to many of the characters in this game. I think the moment that really got me was this fireplace scene that takes place during one of the optional quest lines.
Us in joining Snake Nation. It would make us stronger, he said.
I don't think he peeped a word of it to me. What did Saul do?
Saul dressed the guy down head to toe for messing with the family. Hell, he didn't send him on any jobs for a year.
Gee, really consoling. Thanks. You said yourself you didn't need any.
This scene made me realize how much I've grown to love this game's world and how immersed I was in this experience. Because, yeah, this game is pretty damn immersive. Every borough in the city is distinct and looks unique, despite the city mostly looking the same from the outside. Pacifica is a large, anarchist borough with unconstructed buildings and all kinds of factions and gangs warring with each other. City center is surrounded by corporate buildings and a large roundabout in the very middle of it, with a huge hologram display taking place. Watson is the day-to-day life district with food stores, apartments, and everything that you'd expect to see in a district that prioritizes in delivering people's day-to-day needs. If you look at Night City from the outside, sure, it won't look like each borough looks distinct, but once you're in the thick of it, you'll definitely see it. The only thing that might break your immersion of this game is the NPCs throughout the world. The AI in this game is one of the worst parts about it, specifically the police AI. Everyone's already talked about how bad the police system is in this game, but, I still would like to quickly touch up on it. They'll just chase you for a bit while spawning in out of complete thin air, and then just forget about you after a good 10 to 15 seconds, as long as you're driving away from them. Speaking of driving, it's also kinda shit. Your car constantly feels like it's driving on ice and is extremely skittish. It never really feels like you have full control over your cars in this game, and if you have the option to walk to a destination, I recommend doing that over driving. I should point out that driving feels a lot better on controller than keyboard and mouse, and if you're playing on a console, then you should enjoy the driving a little bit more. But if you are on PC, I strongly recommend playing this game on a controller if you plan to spend a lot of time driving around. If not, keyboard and mouse is probably still the better experience because the combat, I think, works a bit better under that, but, if you plan to spend a lot of time driving from place to place, maybe play on controller, or at least have one connected so that you can swap to it while driving. A couple more issues that I have with this game is that the life paths never really mean all that much, and only change the first hour or two of your main quest, as well as adding a few added dialogue options throughout your playthrough. I also think the leveling economy isn't very strong either. You have a specific level for each of your attributes, such as a level for melee or assault rifles or stealth. This is all great, except after 80 hours of play, I think the highest level I reached in each of these attributes was for blades, where I was level 12 out of 20. I was not close to hitting max level on any of these attributes after 80 hours of playing, and I used blades a good amount. The rate at which you unlock XP for each of these attributes is so stingy, and you'll only ever really hit max level on one of these areas if you focus on it for a significant amount of your playthrough. It would have been nice to have these attributes level a bit faster, or at least have its XP gain altered slightly. Maybe have some of the attributes levels cross over and share XP so that you level them a bit faster. It's not a huge deal, but it does feel quite unrewarding since you level up so slowly in this game. The crafting in this game isn't the best either, and always felt like it takes a back seat and isn't really as important as it could have been. But this is still a very minor thing, and you shouldn't really expect the crafting to be all that important. You might notice a pattern here. Most of the RPG systems aren't really that strong and don't feel like a core part of the experience. Most quests only play out in one specific way apart from a few exceptions, and as mentioned previously, the life paths don't really alter the quest in any way. And I really think that you'll enjoy this game a lot more if you treat it more as an action-adventure game with some RPG systems, rather than a fully fledged RPG. Wrapping up, I think that if you're going to play this game, you should judge it based on what it is, not what it isn't. When I first played this game, I actually didn't really enjoy it that much and didn't get very far into it. And the reason for this, I think, is because I judged the game based on what could have been, rather than appreciating what the game is. Sure, if you really want to pick apart each part of the experience, there are certainly improvements to be made, but you can also say that about pretty much any game. Red Dead Redemption 2 is a game that has subpar combat, and yet nobody really complains about it because the game nails every other aspect of its design. I believe that Cyberpunk 2077 has always been treated a little too harshly, simply because of the bad press surrounding its launch. If this game had launched in a better state, people wouldn't have complained about the combat, or the story, or the driving, or the poor AI, because that isn't the center of the stage. And if you're planning on giving Cyberpunk a try, then now is the best time to get into it. With a brand new expansion coming out later this year, and the Edge Runners anime bringing a ton of new players and fans, this is a great time to get started, and I believe that you'll really enjoy this game if you give it a fair chance. And that is why I believe that Cyberpunk 2077 has always been a great game.